Kochvei, one fate, there was once a poor man. Oh, devoted his love of life to learning Torah in the study hall. When an astrologer once visited his town, everyone ran to see him. But the poor man continued studying and did not go. His wife came into the study hall and found no one there except for her husband. They had all gone to the astrologer. She shouted at him, "You worthless, lazy bum, why don't you go to the astrologer?" But he did not want to go. His wife, though, continued nagging him until he had not choice but to go. So he went to the astrologer, who told him that it was his fate, that it was his fate to be a thief. And he returned to his studies in the study hall. Nanach, nachma, nachman, meuman, 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 nanach, nachman, meuman, nanach, nachma, nachman, meuman. Nanach. Ay 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 ya di da di 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 da di di di. Ay 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 ay. His wife came running and asked him, "No, what did he tell you? What did he tell you?" But he did not want to go. His wife, though, continued nagging him until he had no choice but to go. So he went to the astrologer, who told him that it was his fate to be a thief, and he returned to his studies. In the study hall, his wife came in running and nanach, nachman, nachman, meuman. His wife came running. Nanach, nachman, nachman, meuman. His wife came running and asked him, "What did he tell you?" He told me, "A beggar will always be a beggar," he said. That night he returned home and never ate his meal. He told me, "A beggar will always be a beggar." He told me, a beggar will always be a beggar. He said that he returned home and ate his main meal, a slice of bread. While eating, he began to chuckle, and his wife asked him, "Why are you laughing? You must know something that you don't want to tell me." "Not so," he said. "Not so," he said. He didn't tell me anything. I'm not laughing over anything special. And he continued eating, but again he began to laugh. And again she asked him as above, and he answered as above. Then he burst out in roaring laughter, in such a belly laugh that his breath smelled. "You see," she said, "you certainly know something. Oh, you certainly know something. You certainly know something." So he told her, "The astrologer told me that my fate is to be a thief." "I don't want you to be a thief," she said. I'd rather we be poor. We will manage somehow with what God gives us. But don't become a thief." Shabbos soon came along, and of course they had their Shabbos meals all laid out, black bread, black bread for challah, and whatever else they had, to which they sat down to eat. And then they must have had 4 or 5 daughters who grabbed pieces of bread from each other, for even the bread that they had was not enough to go around. Gott in Himmel, God in heaven. His wife said, "I've had enough of this. I'd prefer you become a thief so that we don't have to suffer this destitution any longer. I've had enough of this. I prefer you become a thief so that we don't have to suffer this destitution destitution any longer, and he had no choice but to do as she wished. He wanted to, and he did not want to, but he went in the end. He wanted to, and he did not want to, but he went in the end. The Rebbe repeated this several times. He wanted to, and he did not want to, but he went in the end. The Rebbe repeated this several times. He wanted to, and he did not want to, but he went in the end. He wanted to, and he did not want to, but he went in the end. He wanted to, and he did not want to, but he went in the end. The Rebbe repeated this several times. Nanach, nachman, nachman, meuman, nanach, nachman, meuman. So he went out to steal, but whom should he steal from? He decided on the richest man in town. Going along to the man's mansion, he found the guards asleep. There was no one around to interrogate him, so he went over to the warehouse and found the lock open. This was his fate. He continued over to the safe and found its lock open as well. He took 4 or 5 rubles, just enough to support his family, and he brought them to his wife. See, he said to her, I have done your wish. Use this for the family, because I will not steal again. Of course not, she replied. Neither do I want it. Yes. You only had to do this on account of your destitution. Neither do I want this. You only had to do this on account of your destitution. But sometime later she began to shout at him. You worthless bum. Oh, you worthless bum. You were in the warehouse. You worthless bum. You worthless bum. You worthless bum. You worthless bum. You were in the warehouse. Why didn't you take enough from me to buy a nice coat? You worthless bum. You were in the warehouse. Why didn't you take enough for me to buy a nice coat? So we had no choice. We had no choice but to go out again to steal. He returned to the warehouse and found another thief there who asked him, "Who are you?" "I'm a thief." "And who are you?" "I'm also a thief." Let's get together and steal. Let's get together and steal. Let's get together and steal. The pauper said to him, "It's my fate." The pauper said to him, let's get together and steal. Let's get together and steal. The pauper said to him, "It's my fate. It's my fate." And the other thief agreed. Then the pauper thought to himself, "If we steal from this man, we will make him into a pauper. On my own, I would only take what I need for a nice coat. But now this other fellow will want to take a lot, and the owner will be left penniless." So we told the other thief, "Why should we take from a Jew? Better let's go and steal from a Gentile." He agreed, and they decided to go and steal from the king, who happened to live in that town. The pauper was confident he would succeed in stealing from the king, since this was his fate. The thief suggested, "Let's steal the king's special two-piece suit that he wore on his coronation day. It will certainly be enough for us for many generations. I know where they are kept." The pauper agreed, for he was confident he would succeed in stealing them, since this was his fate. They went there, entering room within room. Eventually they found the suit. The pockets of the suit were on their own promiseless. After they took them, they began to argue over the suit. Since one piece was larger than the other, the thief claimed that he deserved the larger piece because he knew about them. But the pauper claimed that he deserved the larger one because he is the one with the love of luck, and it was with his luck that they succeeded. So the pauper suggested that he would go ask the king. So the pauper suggested that he would go ask the king. "How can you do that?" said the thief. "How can you do that?" said the thief. Nevertheless, answered the pauper, "I will go and ask him. If you are able to go and ask the king, then on my own I will give you the larger garment, said the thief. So he accompanied him to the king. Someone was lying down around next to the king, telling him stories to help him fall asleep. The two of them picked up the bed on which the king was sleeping and carried it with the king into a different room. Meanwhile, the king awoke, assuming that he was in the same place. The thief began telling him the story of two thieves and asked the king which one of the two deserves the larger garment. The king was outraged at the question and said, "Why are you asking me such a question? Obviously the pauper deserves it, since it was his fate. Tell me now another story." The thief told him another story, and the king fell asleep, and they then carried him back into the previous room. In the morning it was found out that the king's garments had been stolen. The king remembered that the one who had been lying down next to him had told him this story and had asked him which one deserves the larger garment. So he assumed that this person must know about the theft, but he said that he knows nothing, despite being beaten. But he said that he knows nothing, despite being beaten. They continued to beat him. They continued to beat him soundly, and torture him. But he continued to claim that he knows nothing. King then sent to the archbishop, to the archbishop, to ask him if indeed this man may not have been the thief. To ask him if indeed this man may not have been the thief. The young archbishop said that it is indeed possible that he knows nothing, and added that the king was a fool for ruling that the pauper deserves the larger garment. The king was outraged at the archbishop for considering him a fool, and he wanted to punish him. The king was outraged at the archbishop for considering him a fool, and he wanted to punish him, but his hands were tied. Meanwhile, a major search for the theft was underway, but nothing was found. The king then gave instructions to decree that whoever stole it should come forward and acknowledge it, promising that nothing would be done to him. The king just wanted to know how it had been possible to steal those garments. Crowds and crowds of people were all over talking about this incident. The pauper approached one of these crowds and asked them what they were talking about. Upon their telling him, he said, "What's the ruckus about? Whoever stole it will bring it back. Whoever stole it will bring it back." The people shouted at him. He approached another group and asked them as well, and they too shouted at him. Everyone is saying that you know about the theft. You are liable with your life to tell. Everyone is saying that you know about the theft. You are liable with your life to tell. Yes, he said, I do know about the theft. Nanach, nachma, meuman. If you know, you must go and tell. They said, "All right, I will go and tell." He responded. The pauper came in front of the king and told him, "I know about the theft. The king said that he very much would like to meet the thief. The king said that he very much would like to meet the thief. "It is I," said the pauper, and with that the king kissed him. "How did you do it?" asked the king. "It is I," said the pauper, and with that the king kissed him. "How did you do it?" asked the king, and the pauper told him the whole story. The other thief and the pauper told him the whole story. The other thief was sought, and the second piece of the suit that was in his possession was also returned. The king then said to the pauper, "Do something to the archbishop. I am very angry with him." And the pauper said that he would. The pauper instructed to have a suit made for him, identical to that which the archbishop wears when he leads services. He also had them catch many turtles and bring many candles. He dressed himself in the garments, glued a candle to each of the turtles, allowed the turtles to crawl about throughout the chapel, and stood near the altar and began shouting. Everyone gathered, including the archbishop, who was terrified upon seeing the flames and hearing a voice, without knowing what it was all about. The Papa then said to the Archbishop, I have revealed myself to you in order to bring you straight into paradise. I have revealed myself to you in order to bring you straight into paradise. With that the Archbishop fell to his face. But before you can enter paradise, but before you can enter paradise, Papa continued, the Papa continued, you must first go through hell for a short while, then I will bring you to paradise. The Papa then instructed the Archbishop to get into a sack, and when he had, he went over and tied him in. He then had the sack carried to the king and tied hanging. He then had the sack carried to the king and tied hanging in the royal courtyard and tied hanging in the royal courtyard. A proclamation was given out, and everyone gathered and saw that there was someone hanging in the sack, and saw that there was someone hanging in this sack, but knew nothing what it was all about, They began throwing stones at the sack. They threw many stones at the sack until the Archbishop was badly hurt and all his teeth were broken. Meanwhile, the Archbishop did not know what was happening. Was this really the hell he had been told he had to first endure? Or was this some joke? After a while the king instructed to have him thrown down. They threw him down and opened the sack, and he emerged in great disgrace. And he emerged in great disgrace in an alternate version of the story. In an alternate version of this story, the Papa was eventually hanged. Since every criminal gets his due while he was being led to the gallows. The devil followed next to him, carrying a sack of shoes, and told him, how much effort did I invest until I caught you? Look at all the shoes I wore out. While he was being led to the gallows, the devil followed next to him, carrying a sack of shoes, and told him, how much effort did I invest until I caught you? Look at all the shoes I wore out. Look at all the shoes I wore out. Look at all the shoes I wore out. This is the way of the devil. First it seduces and then it torments, as is the story of the rabbi. You never lose heart, never lose heart. Never lose heart, ain't shame yish. Nanach, nachman, meuman. There was once a pauper who earned his living from digging clay to sell. While digging out clay, he found a precious stone that was worth a fortune where he was digging. Since he did not know how much it was worth, he went to an appraiser to evaluate it. The man told him that there was no one in the country who could afford to pay its value. So he suggested that he travel to the capital city of London. Being that he was a pauper, nanach, nachman, meuman. Being that he was a pauper and didn't have the money for a ticket, he went and sold everything he owned, and then went from house to house collecting donations until he had enough money to travel to the port. Since he didn't have money to purchase a ticket to board the ship, he went over to the captain and showed him the gem. The captain immediately took him on board with great great respect, assuring him that he is completely confident that he will pay him. He gave him a room, assuring him that he is completely confident that he will pay him. He gave him a room in first class accommodations with all the conveniences, as if he was one of the wealthiest people. And in this room there was a window facing the sea. Now the pauper derived constant pleasure and enjoyment. Now the pauper derived constant pleasure and enjoyment from looking at the diamond, especially during meals. Joy and an expanded heart are beneficial and healing for easing digestion, especially during meals. Joy and an expanded heart are beneficial and healing, freezing digestion. Once, though, sitting down to eat the diamond on the table for his enjoyment, he fell asleep. Meanwhile, the waiter came in and removed the tablecloth. Off with its crumbs, and not noticing the diamond, emptied it all into the sea. When the pauper awoke from his sleep, he realized what had happened, and he was extremely distressed. He nearly lost his mind. What would he do? The captain was a martyr. The captain was a martyr. Was a martyr who would murder him for the cost of the ticket. So he pretended to be happy as if nothing had happened. Now the captain used to chat with the pauper for several hours every day, and he came to chat on this day also. The pauper pretended to be happy, and the captain did not notice any change in him at all. The captain then said to him, I see that you are wise and honest. I see that you are wise and honest. I want to purchase a huge amount of grain to sell in London, where I can earn a very large profit. But I am afraid that they will accuse me of stealing from the royal treasury. So I would like to make this purchase in your name, and I will pay you well for this. The pauper liked the idea, and that is what they did. As soon as they arrived in London, the captain died, and everything on board remained in the pauper's name. It was worth many times the value of the diamond. The rebbe concluded, nach the diamond was not his. Proof is that he lost it. The grain was his, proof being that he kept it. For the only reason he was able to acquire, but the only reason he was able to acquire what was really his was because he did not lose heart. But the only reason he was able to acquire what was really his was because he did not lose heart. Mitzvah gedayla liyos besemcha semcha tamid oi story 3 caps passion story 3 caps passion Caps in Pasha. There was once a Jew who was the favorite royal minister of a Turkish sultan. The sultan loved him very deeply, more than he did any other of his ministers. And he invited him every day to his palace to enjoy his company. But the other ministers were jealous and plotted to bring charges against him before the king, and in this way to be rid of him. One of these ministers was called Kapsin Pavamasho. He hated the Jew more than all the other ministers, but to the Jew he made believe that he was his friend. Every day he would be looking to find some way how he could succeed in plotting against him before the king. Once this pasha went over to the Jew and began speaking with him cunningly. I've just been with the king, he told him, and he told me that though he loves you, he suffers from one thing. He suffers from one thing. Whenever you go to speak with him, he cannot stand the odor from your mouth. He smells an offensive odor coming from your mouth. He cannot be without you, but he suffers greatly. He cannot be without you, but he suffers greatly from this. So this is my advice: whenever you go to the king, hold a perfumed handkerchief over your mouth, so that the king will not smell the offensive odor coming from your mouth. mouth, for the perfume will neutralize the odor. This way you will not be offensive to the king. In his innocence, the Jew believed him and decided to act accordingly. Meanwhile, though, this pasha went to the king and told him that this Jew had told him that he suffers greatly whenever he speaks with the king, for he smells an offensive odor from the king's mouth. Therefore he had decided that henceforth, when he comes to speak with the king, he'll hold a perfumed handkerchief. He will hold a perfumed handkerchief over his mouth, so that he will not smell the offensive odor coming from the king's mouth. And proof of this is, concluded the pasha, that when he comes to speak with you tomorrow, you will see with your own eyes that he will hold a handkerchief over his mouth. The king was enraged. The king was enraged upon hearing this, and said to the pasha, if I will see tomorrow that you are right, I will have him put to death. The next day, the Jew comes before the king holding a handkerchief over his mouth, as the pasha had advised him, since he had trusted him. When the king saw this, he was convinced that the pasha had spoken the truth, so he immediately wrote out the following letter. When the bearer of this letter comes before you, throw him immediately into the furnace in which all those sentenced to death are burnt into the furnace in which all those sentenced to death are burnt. The king signed the letter with his seal and said to the Jew, please take this letter personally to the addressee, who is in such and such a place. The Jew took the letter and promised the king. The Jew took the letter and promised the king that he would do as instructed, and not knowing what was written in it, the Jew went home. Now, this Jew was very particular about performing the commandment of circumcision for Jewish baby boys whenever he was honored with the opportunity of performing this ritual. He ignored any and all obstacles in order to perform. This commandment, which was very precious to him. So on that day, when he was supposed to bring this letter from the king to that place where he was sent, who desired to save his faithful servant, God who desired to save his faithful servant, arranged for someone to come from some village to honor him, to travel there. Arranged for someone to come from some village to honor him, to travel there and circumcise his son. And since it was the Jews' custom never to turn down an opportunity to perform this commandment, he began to think what he could do with the king's instructions regarding the letter. So God arranged that just then the pasha came along. The Jew told the pasha that he had been with the king, and that the king had given him this letter to deliver to someone, but that God had given him the opportunity this day to perform a circumcision. And being that he never turns down the opportunity to perform this commandment, therefore he requests, therefore he requests of the pasha to take the letter and deliver it. The pasha was elated. For now he would have further slander against the Jew before the king for not fulfilling the king's instructions. Regarding the letter. So the pasha takes the letter from the Jew and delivers it to the person to whom it was addressed. It was addressed. Now this man who was in charge of burning the sentenced to death immediately grabs hold of the pasha and throws him in the furnace. The pasha was burned to death, and he deserved to be. The pasha was burned to death as he deserved to be, according to God's rule of measure for measure. According to God's rule for measure of measure for measure to God's rule of measure for measure. The Jew, knowing nothing of what had happened, returned to the king the next day. When the king saw him, he was amazed. Have you not yet delivered the letter that I gave you to the man? Ask the Jew, ask the king, have you not yet deliver the letter that I gave you to the man, asked the king. My dear king, answered the Jew, I gave the letter over to Kapsan Pasha. I gave the letter over to Kapsan Pasha to deliver to the man, since God had given me the opportunity to perform the commandment of circumcision, and my custom is never to turn down an opportunity to perform this commandment. The king understood that this was no coincidence, that the Pasha who had accused the Jew to him should be the one to be burned. So the king asked him, so why did you place? So the king asked him, so why did you place a handkerchief over your mouth when you spoke with me? The Pasha had advised me to do so, answered the Jew. The Pasha had advised me to do so. The Pasha had advised me to do so. He had answered the Jew. He had told me that you had told him that you cannot bear the odor of my mouth. The king then told him how the Pasha had slandered him before him. He said that you told him that you cannot stand the odor from my mouth, and that you would henceforth hold a handkerchief over your mouth when you speak with me. The king also told him what was written in the letter and said, now I know that God who rules the world protects his faithful from all evil. Now I know that God who rules the world protects his faithful from all evil. What the Pasha wanted to do to you befell him, and God punished him as he deserved. Henceforth the Jew was even more esteemed than before in the king's eyes, far above all the other ministers. Nanach, nachma, nachma, meuman. Story for the flood. Nanach, nachma, nachma, meuman.
And the handkerchief and the basket to slander.
No, nanach.
No.
Nanach, nachman, nachman,